Hello everybody, welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. So today we are talking about Time Bandits. So this is the 2K version from Criterion. I believe they have also released a 4K version. I don't have that version of it, but Criterion doesn't put new things on their 4K upgrades. So I believe it's exactly the same, except of course the picture is better. I didn't mind the picture on this. I'm no expert about picking out the subtle differences. I would like to have the 4K version, but since there's nothing new on it, the 2K version is just fine for me for now. I really enjoy it, of course. I am a huge Terry Gilliam fan. I've enjoyed everything that he's done. I always look forward to new releases that he has coming out. My favorites are probably Fisher King and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Those two are really big for me. I love those films. Terry Gilliam, I think, is kind of a method director. I feel like he really needs to feel like he's suffering in order to make a good movie. If he's not suffering, I'm not sure that he feels like he's doing his best work. So when you watch a lot of his documentaries, he really talks about how horrible things were, which I think is an interesting point of view to have as an artist, to say if you're not suffering, you're not doing good work, I guess. I don't agree with that personally, but I think that that's a place that he comes from. And I think a lot of artists come from that place, to be perfectly honest. They need to feel like they're in turmoil and that they're struggling in order to get this thing created to justify its existence, maybe. I'm not sure, but I love his work. I don't feel like he has to justify anything. The films are great and they speak for themselves. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Time Bandits, the production itself. So it came out in 1981. It's directed by Terry Gilliam. It was co-written by Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin, who's from Monty Python, of course. And if you don't know, Terry Gilliam is also from Monty Python. I think he's the only American in the group. So Terry Gilliam started directing films for Monty Python with Monty Python and the Holy Grail. He was a co-director on that production. So then Monty Python went on to do The Life of Brian, which is not directed by Terry Gilliam, but of course Terry Gilliam is in it because he's part of the group. But that film famously lost funding, so George Harrison and another partner created Handmade Films, and they went ahead and put up the money to make sure that The Life of Brian got made. I believe the next film that Terry Gilliam did was probably Jabberwocky. And then after Jabberwocky, I think he wanted to do Brazil, apparently, but he wasn't able to get everything together for that. So he went ahead and made Time Bandits with Handmade Films with George Harrison so that he could get everything he needed in order to make Brazil. It has a pretty amazing cast. It's got Sean Connery, John Cleese, of course. Shelley Duvall's in it, which is really fun. She, of course, recently passed away, which is very sad. It's really strange getting old. Ian Holm is in it. Michael Palin's in it, of course. Catherine Helmond is in it. David Warner's in the film. Kenneth Baker's in it. He, of course, is from Star Wars, doing R2-D2, which is awesome. And my personal favorite from the movie is Jack Purvis. He's just incredible in this movie. He's so present and focused, and everybody in the movie's great. I feel like because this is kind of just a silly comedy, and I think this is kind of a family film, I don't want to just flat out say it's for kids, because it's got some pretty serious themes and some pretty adult stuff that happens in it, but I feel like it's kind of family oriented. So there's times when I feel like the tone shifts when we go from kind of this serious, dark, weird film to like Monty Python sketches. Just, you know what I mean? We're just taking corners like crazy in this movie, which is just fine. It's a very, very trippy, fun, cool movie. But this guy's acting is just so top notch. He's so aggressive and in the moment. I just think he's a really great actor. I really appreciated his performance specifically. He's great. I really enjoy the music in this film. It's very kind of interesting and I guess trippy's the best way to describe it. It's strange. It's strange music, and I really kind of enjoyed that. It's done by a person named Michael Moran. I don't know much about this person. According to some of the research that I did, he's a music producer. But I really liked the work that he did on this film. I appreciated it. And of course, George Harrison has a song at the end. I'm a huge George Harrison fan, of course. Some of the greatest rock music ever written was written by George Harrison and the Beatles, of course. I don't really love the song at the end of the film. It's not my favorite George Harrison song. It's a strange one. But, of course, it's great that he contributed a song to the film. This film was very successful. I think people really consider it Terry Gilliam's first big success as a filmmaker. It did really well. Today, I feel like it's more of a cult classic. I don't know how well known the movie actually is. If you went up and just asked the average person what they thought of Time Bandits, I'm not sure they'd know what you were talking about. But it was very successful at the time, and it's a really wonderful, great movie. So the basic plot of the film is a group of people who work for the supreme being, who's probably God. They talk about how it took him 7 days to create the earth and all this kind of stuff. So it's probably literally Christianity's God. A group of people that work for God become disgruntled, and they steal a map that has the locations of time holes on Earth. Apparently, Earth wasn't created very well. It was kind of a botched job. And there's certain areas at certain times where you can jump through a portal and pop out at another time in another location. So they steal this map because they want to become international thieves. And while they're running from the supreme being with the map, they end up bumping into a child who comes with them. So you've got these bandits and this child, and they're all working together to try to become time bandits, basically. It's fun. It's very silly. It's a cute movie. It's got some dark themes, some really silly stuff, because, of course, Monty Python is all over it. And it's really well done. It's a great movie. A couple of my favorite points. These are kind of spoilers. If you haven't seen Time Bandits, I highly recommend it. You absolutely should see it. It's a great movie. A couple of my favorite parts are John Cleese, of course, always stands out. He always has stood out for me in Monty Python and in the films that he's done as well. He's just incredible. And he plays Robin Hood in this film. It's a really bizarre, interesting take on Robin Hood and this band of thieves that he's created. So I really enjoy that part of the film. I really like all of the evil stuff and the way that God kind of approaches dealing with evil as like this weird experiment that God just thought he would try. And of course, a bunch of people die because of evil. And it's this weird kind of critique on religion and God specifically, which I find very interesting and very cool. Those are probably my favorite parts of the film. I do highly recommend it. It's really, really great. There wasn't a lot of behind-the-scenes drama for this film. It's an early film for Terry Gilliam, so I feel like he's just trying to prove that he can do it. And also, he wanted to make sure that he could make Brazil after, which was a much larger project than Time Bandits was. But Time Bandits still is it's a very big production. I mean, you've got all these different locations, and you've got the weird imagination world, the dark world that they have to go to, with the most famous part being, I think, the giant coming out of the water and the boat basically becoming a hat on his head. So many fascinating and weird things occur in this film. It's really worth checking out. All right, so I'm going to segue just a little bit because they have now made a TV series, which I think starts, for me, it basically starts tomorrow. Of course, if you're watching this, it's the 24th of July, 2024. I think is the first night that you can watch the first episode of Time Bandits on Apple TV. So first off, I'm kind of excited for this, I guess. It's a very weird one because Terry Gilliam is a very specific kind of filmmaker. There is no way that they can make this a Terry Gilliam production without having Terry Gilliam direct it. And Terry Gilliam is not directing it. I think they got the guy from, is it the second Thor movie? The Ragnarok Thor movie? I think they got that guy to do it. And he's fun, right? I really like him. I think he's a good director. He's not Terry Gilliam. I'm going to say that just straight up, right? So I don't think they're really trying to imitate Terry Gilliam's style. I think they just like the idea of the film. Now, Terry Gilliam, I believe, is listed as an executive producer. So I'm pretty sure that George Harrison's estate and Terry Gilliam both got paid for this. So I don't in any way feel bad for Terry Gilliam that somehow somebody stole his thing and they're going to make a mockery of it, right? None of that. I don't know if this will be any good. This is a weird subject. I'm going to segue just a little bit here. So let's talk about Shakespeare, okay? Shakespeare, of course, is in the public domain. I believe there was a time way back in the 1700s and the late 1600s when you couldn't do a Shakespeare production if you weren't Shakespeare. Shakespeare had control of Shakespeare's stuff. Shakespeare would write it, he'd give it to his actors, they'd do the play, and that would be that. Maybe they'd have a revival later or something, but that would be that. But these days, if you own a theater company, you can do a Shakespeare production without paying anyone. You don't have to let anyone know. There are no rights associated with doing Shakespeare. And that has made Shakespeare very popular for small theater companies, right? I've run a couple small theater companies. We've done a ton of Shakespeare. None of it was particularly good. I've got to say that out loud. You know, we were a small theater company, wanted to do something for free, so you grab Shakespeare. I do not feel sorry for Shakespeare that small theater companies are still doing his plays, even though they're probably not the best productions. In fact, there are large theater companies that do horrible productions of Shakespeare. There are productions where you just think, what in the world are you doing to this play? And I know that the reason those things happen is because people think everything's been done with this. And of course, I think that that's completely true. Shakespeare literally said, there's nothing new under the sun. Right? I mean, we're talking back in the 1700s. Everybody's kind of in agreement that there are no new plots. Nothing new is happening. Everything is ripping off something else. So, for Terry Gilliam to sell off the rights to this film to somebody else to get some money, I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that at all. I don't think that I'm specifically going to love it, but who cares, right? I mean, the only thing that really matters with this production, financially speaking, is does Apple get some new subscribers? And we'll never know. We have no idea how well these things do when it comes to making somebody go, oh man, now I have to sign up for Apple because I love Time Bandits. Or I think the lead actor in this is a person from the Friends TV show. So maybe somebody loves that person and they want to watch the Time Bandit show. Or maybe somebody loves the Ragnarok guy. Or I think one of the Flight of the Conchord guys is in it. Maybe somebody loves that guy, so they sign up. You know what I mean? It's a very strange world that we're in right now. But I do want to make it very clear that I totally support Terry Gilliam selling the rights to this so that somebody else could make a bunch of money. I have no problem with that. And in fact, I have an opposite problem where if an artist complains if Shakespeare somehow came back and wrote a huge article about how mad he was that people were doing crappy versions of his plays, I would lose a lot of respect for Shakespeare, to be perfectly honest with you. Talk about a first world goofy problem to have. You're still popular. Whoa. You know what I mean? Like, seriously. If an artist wants to sell off their work to somebody else, more power to them. I'm not mad at George Lucas for making millions and millions of dollars to sell Star Wars to Disney. It doesn't bother me at all, even if I'm not in love with all of the things that Disney has done. And it is kind of a special case because honestly, I'm not in love with all the stuff that George Lucas did with Star Wars before he sold it. It doesn't bother me. If they feel like it's time for them to get their MF movie check, as Jay and Silent Bob would have put it, then yeah, it's time for them to get paid. That's just fine. Because I know that I can go watch the original, right? Any ties that I have to Time Bandits are all right here. This is all that I need. And if there's some 7-year-old somewhere who can't get through this movie because it's boring and weird to them, that's fine. And if they fall in love with the Disney TV show, that's fine. Whatever. Or if they hate it, that's fine too. Whatever. It doesn't matter. The artists got paid. And that's the most important thing for me. You know, they got to choose that this happens. And if they're just so successful that it just kind of happens naturally. I don't know really anything about fan fiction. I've heard of this. I started hearing about it, I think, with anime mostly. But I know that people write stories about things that already exist without paying the rights for them, but they don't try to sell them, so it's not illegal. So I'm fine with that. You know, I guess my question would honestly be, why wouldn't you want to make up your own stuff so that you might be able to get paid for it and get published? You know what I mean? But if somebody loves something that much, honestly, for the artist to complain that somebody loves something that much, that they're literally writing their own stories based on it and not selling them, I want to make it very clear, they're not selling them. I think that says something about the artist, to be honest. That's kind of tacky and weird. You know, I'm just fine with these products being sold to other companies in order to make more money. That's just fine. Terry Gilliam probably doesn't want to make another Time Bandits movie. But if somebody else does, that's just fine, as long as they pay George Harrison and Terry Gilliam. All right, so Time Bandits, excellent. You absolutely should see it. It's wonderful. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the like button. If you want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe, and have a great day.